Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled Witch Trial. This goes back to when I was in the 8th grade in middle school or junior high, depending whatever you want to like whatever you like to call it. So I was 13-ish, somewhere in there. Right on the cusp of puberty, or already hit it, or something like that. I can't remember exactly when, but it was somewhere in there. Probably 93, 93, 94, somewhere in there. 1993, 1994, 8th grade. We had some interesting teachers. We had, was his name really? I can't remember now. Maybe it was. We had some interesting names for teachers in middle school. First of all, we had Mrs. Sweet, who I had for math, but in 7th grade. She was this crotchety kind of old lady. She always wore like an old sweater kind of thing. And she wasn't the greatest teacher out there. I think she had a tooth that was kind of fucked up. We used to go like this. I don't know why. Maybe it kind of stuck out or something. There was something very peculiar about her. Well, two other teachers who she worked with in that building, Mr. Chemnitzer, say it with me, Chemnitzer, guy was awesome. His nephew, or his grandson, or whoever this kid was, little loopy in the head, but nice enough kid sometimes. Mr. Chemnitzer was the social studies teacher. He was a great teacher. And then in 8th grade for math, I had Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson was not Mr. Wilson on Dennis the Menace, and Mr. Wilson wasn't black. He was white, and his last name was Wilson. And even at that time, it was hard to find somebody with the last name Wilson that was still white. Not that there's anything wrong with that, just saying, it used to predominantly be that way in America. It was a fairly common last name, and these people were white. Same thing with the last name Williams. There's plenty of people with that last name that are white and plenty that are black, but predominantly, at least in my area, you'd only find white people with that name. Anyway, that was that. Mr. Wilson was all of 30-something. He kind of still had like spiked hair, thought he was kind of cool. He was an okay teacher, but not the greatest. He always said, if you have a question about a question on a test I give you, please come up to my desk and show it to me and ask me for a better explanation. He wanted you genuinely to do well. Mrs. Sweet, on the other hand, was this crotchety lady, and I don't know who invented this. Oh, and there was a third teacher involved with this, I forgot. Mr. Ferrigno. And, yeah, Ferrigno. I think his name may have actually been Lou. Like Lou Ferrigno, but no relation, of course. He was a bit of a weirdo, but he was Italian, as you might expect. All right. So those were the teachers involved, and all three of them. It turns out whatever period this was, I don't remember when it was or what class or whatever, but it so turns out that Mrs. Sweet was on hall monitor duty right outside Chemnitzer's classroom. I guess Chemnitzer was teaching about the witch trials, like back in the day in history, social studies kind of stuff or something. And I don't know who said this or how the idea got planted about Mrs. Sweet being a witch. So this idea was planted somewhere, I don't know, by a kid or whoever or what. And quite frankly and quite honestly, I don't know what went on behind the scenes with this. And looking back on it, if there was nothing that actually did go on behind the scenes, then this could have been a big problem for some of these teachers. Anyway, this was unbeknownst to the principal and shit like that. They kind of kept it amongst themselves, and all of these male teachers did not talk to Mrs. Sweet about this, unless, like I said, they actually kind of briefed her on what's going on beforehand, and I'll get back to that at the end. The idea was decided that Mrs. Sweet was a witch, and because Chemnitzer was teaching the witch trials and shit like that, he would take the class right out into the hallway and bring Mrs. Sweet up on witch trial charges. And it was this made-up thing. The whole thing, if it lasted 3 minutes, it was a lot. Chemnitzer had a black robe. Wilson had a black robe. Ferrigno, I think, was teaching a class or something, but he was kind of in on it also. And obviously, the end result with this is, of course, Mrs. Sweet is going to be found guilty of being a witch. I remember somebody saying somewhere, oh, look at it outside today. It's all cloudy and rainy and stuff like that. Mrs. Sweet must be out sunbathing because she was a witch, you know? It was kind of like that. So she was definitely a weirdo in that. But anyway, she was brought up on this witch trial, found guilty, and hiding in the big sleeves of the robes that Wilson and Chemnitzer were wearing, they had cans of silly string. And because she was found guilty, she was sentenced to that, and they fucking sprayed her down with silly string. Now remember, he took the entire class out in the hallway, and all the kids are hooting and hollering and shit like that to see this happen to Mrs. Sweet, and it was the greatest fucking thing and shit like that. And I remember she just kind of covered her face and just sat there and kind of shook her head kind of thing like that. And it's just silly string and no harm done in that. But I really hope, looking back, that there was some shit going on behind the scenes and they got Sweet to agree to this, because otherwise there really could have been problems, especially today with the Me Too movement and all this bullshit and sexual allegation charges from 50 years ago with people, we're not going to mention any names or anything, you know, and all the crazy shit that goes on. She might be looking, if she's still alive today, to sue these guys for that shit that happened back in fucking 93, 94, whatever it was. Even though nothing really happened. You know? You just don't know anymore. This world has fucking changed, but man, the delight that all of us kids had seeing that. And I had completely blocked that out of my mind, and for no reason whatsoever, like many of these old war stories, just came to mind out of nothing. And I said, oh, fuck, I forgot all about that. Well, there it was. The Mrs. Sweet witch trial. And they sprayed her down with silly string. Motherfucker, that was really great. I wish I could say that Wilson was a great teacher and Sweet was a great teacher. Chemnitzer was awesome. Ferrigno, not bad. I'll give him an honorable mention. Could get a little pissy now and again, but he was all right and shit like that. But anyway, that was that. And if Sweet was in on this, you know what? Thanks for being a great sport. I don't know. What else can I say? But that was the story of the witch trial. That's going to wrap this one up. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you click like. Make sure you click subscribe. And take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.